Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode on the Lessons from the Game podcast. I'm joined by my co host, Ben Pegna, and today we're going to be talking about going back to school, going back to your team as a young player, as a youngster, trying to find yourself, making good impressions. But the reason I decided I wanted to talk about this is because my man Ben, he shared an unbelievable post video on social media that I was super impressed. It really gave me good goosebumps. But before we deep dive into that, Ben, brother, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, G. Thanks. Yeah, it's been a good week. It's been a busy week back to school this week with my youngest son and all the stuff to do with that. And then I was coaching on Tuesday night again for a club that I've been helping with some D sessions over the summer. And then school is flying for both of us. It's sort of, I know you had a busy community call last night where you did a bit of a masterclass as well. And I'm super energized by school. It's an incredible platform, and I think we're both finding our feet with it. But it's really enjoyable, and it feels really good to be connecting with people, getting feedback, getting questions, and really being able to serve and help people develop and fulfill their potential. So it's been a good week. I forgot it was Thursday, to be honest. The week's flying by. So yeah, what about you, mate? Have you had a good one?
No, it's been great, man. Same as you. Been busy on school as well. But I think I'm going to talk about that at the end of this pod. I think there's some great information we can share with our audience. But Ben, coming back to the point, it's like back to school. As a parent, I'm gonna lie. My daughter went to college here in France, so she went to what we call CZM. So she's now went to another school, new school. And I'll be honest with you, as a parent, I was stressed out. I was like wondering, like, how's this gonna go? All of a sudden she's gonna be one of the youngest kids. There are older kids in the school. Even though she's going with a group of friends, how's she gonna react? How's it gonna impact her confidence? And then on top of that as well, she took the bus for the first time this week. And
Awesome.
as a parent, I was stressed. I'm like, oh my
Yeah.
god, is she gonna be okay? So yeah, I think you did this unbelievable post in the week, and you were talking about going back to school, and you were giving some tips for to youngsters on how to carry themselves, how to present themselves, and coming down to body language, etc. But tell me a bit more. What was the inspiration to that post? Why did you share that?
Oh, it's not a short answer, G, but I think I've been fortunate enough, as you are, to get around to do different coaching opportunities and coach at schools and at clubs and one-off sessions sometimes, and then with a local community club, and then the next level with more senior players and in different countries, in South Africa, back in the UK, sometimes visiting France. And it's different everywhere you go, obviously. And I know you experienced the same thing, but you were doing a stage in the summer with kids and helping them and on summer camps and things like that. And I was at a session a few months ago, and they had an awards process. And I was just watching because I wasn't part of the awards, and the main coach was giving out the awards. And as people came up, I think only one person that came forward looked the coach in the eye as they received the award. And something really struck me then, and they weren't young kids, and so something struck me then. That's the first thing. I think. Secondly, I keep on getting asked questions by parents, and they're saying, look, how should my kid, they're talking about the complexities of the game, and they're talking about all these things like my kid can do this, and they're talking about strength and conditioning programs. And then I get some insight, and I see, but they're not doing the very basic things when they go and present themselves. They're not going up to a coach, they're not walking in with confidence, they're not friendly, smiling, engaging, eye contact. They're not sort of initiating the conversation. They're a bit shy and a bit nervous, which I understand. But I thought it was important to do a post and explain that this is what the coach's expectation is. This is how you're going to convey yourself in a really good, positive way. That's not going to come across as too flashy or confident or overconfident, but it's just going to come across as I'm assured in who I am, and also to be encouraging and positive, so that you are that person that your teammates want to engage with as well. That they don't think this guy knows everything, but is actually curious and sort of considerate. And that was the sort of the main motivation behind it, to try and help guide people in that scenario.
Okay, Ben, and what do you think we as parents can do to help our kids, in terms of, The simple thing you just mentioned, actually looking the adult, and that we do see that with a lot of youngsters, they're constantly looking down, and there can be various reasons for that. It's either intimidation or lack of confidence. How as parents can we help our kids in terms of, because I do think there's a massive responsibility for parents, and I think it comes down to the same old thing we're always talking about, the amount of time we are spending on our phone, parents and youngsters. But what advice would you give to kids in order for them to help their child?
Yeah, G. I think it's. I've got three kids. I know you know it's, and so I'm not saying this from like I know everything and I get it right the whole time. But I think it's really important for us to be the person it starts with. Too often we can defer responsibility to the teachers and other people who have influence on them, their coaches. I think the basics are really important. I was really struck when you and Corne Kricker, who was a recent guest on Lessons from the Game, you spoke about your experiences at Paul Boys School, and when somebody walks in the room, you stand up. When somebody else comes in or you enter a room, you greet everybody. Now, that's also how I was brought up. And when you go and coach in France, for example, when you walk in a changing room, you have to greet everybody. You would be really, like, if you didn't greet everybody, you would be a bit rude. And so I think the responsibility is basically starting with us as parents to say, look, this is the minimum standard. When you walk into a room, it's polite for you to look people in the eye. It's polite for you to greet people. It's polite, but it's also it's going to allow you to put your best foot forward, because people are going to see, oh, this is a young person who wants to engage, and they're open, and it just allows dialogue and opportunities. But I think it's not about doing the right thing because it's the right thing. I would really encourage any young person listening to think, wow, this is going to open up opportunities for me. Because I guarantee if you can, I speak to a lot of young people often, and maybe my kids, about the phone usage that you just mentioned. Sometimes I'm just begging them to just put the phone down for 10 and look around you. You could go and have a chat with that person. I know that person's really fascinating and interesting. And if you take 2 minutes, a lifetime of opportunities might open up to you. But you're too busy watching that person on Instagram, for example, instead of actually engaging with them. So I think, sorry, it's a very long answer, but with parents, I think we can take control and help the situation and really try and encourage these basic things like greeting somebody properly, shaking their hand, looking them in the eye, standing up as they enter a room. Those basic things that you and I sort of probably took for granted growing up.
That takes me back to my dad. Had always said to me, son, saying hello doesn't cost you anything. I think that's important, just saying hi. And when you mentioned in your video talking about the body language and about that, really, struck something in a sense. It reminded me actually back in the day with Heineke Meyer at the Bulls. And there was this time he hammered into us, guys, when you walk to the pitch, to the stadium, or you cross your opponents before the game, you got to be in what we call gunslinger mode. And he spoke, what's a gunslinger? A gunslinger is always ready. He's ready to shoot. He's got his shoulders out. He's got his chest out. Not in an arrogant state, but you're ready. You're confident. You look your opponent in the eye. You're not trying to look away. You make eye contact and you give him the nod. Yeah. Calm and composed. Even though inside you might be shitting yourself, it's okay. But just by having your chest slightly out, your shoulders slightly pulled back, not in an arrogant way, but just being that composed and just giving that nod. I think that's important thing. But the question I want to ask you, Ben, is, and I think because you get a lot of youngsters out there, they're lower self-esteem, but let's also remind our audience, neither any one of us, we are psychologists. We don't have a background. Maybe you have a hidden diploma I don't know about. No. Sometimes I think you do. But I think, what advice would you give to a youngster? Is low on self-esteem, low on confidence, with your experience, all right? And maybe just remind everybody listening, parents or kids, we are not specialists, all right? I'm just asking your opinion, Ben. Is there anything that you think that players can do or youngsters can do to help them to be a bit more confident in the environment at school?
It's a good question, G. I think a point I mentioned in that video on Instagram was to remember that everybody else is in the same position as you. I think it's really it's easy to think everybody else is a bit more confident or a bit more assured or they've been here. But I think it's a very confidence boosting thing to remember. I'm not unique in this situation. Everybody is nervous. It's the new school year. Everybody's in this team for the first time. Everybody's being spoken to by this teacher or coach for the first time. Nobody knows what's going to happen here. So everybody else is nervous, and so I'm just in the same position as everybody else. And so I don't have to be overly concerned here now. Some people will have a default setting of being a bit more nervous or about certain scenarios. I would be like that if I was going into a bad classroom or, and it was so super, I don't know, chemistry or something like that. I'd be trying to keep my head down, or, in other environments, I might be more confident. I get that. I understand that. But the thing I would encourage a young player going back to school to remember is that your situation is not unique. You, as an experienced international player, G, you would have been nervous at certain situations going into par boys and being, that would have, so everybody, even you, or even Corner Crick, or even Victor Matfield, or whoever the guys that we've interviewed and spoken to, they get nervous as well. So just remember that. And then just remember to prepare properly if you can, and I think preparation, and whatever that might look like, gives you a lot of confidence. It does amaze me when I speak to some people. I say, "Oh, what's your teacher called?" or "What's the master?" And they say, "Oh, I don't know." And I'm thinking, we just call him, this, or they. I'm saying, just do a bit of research, just to understand, because I think anything that you can do, giving you familiarity before you walk into an environment, gives you a bit of confidence. When everything is unknown, and it's the first time you're doing something, that makes it just a bit more nervous. So if you can speak to somebody else before you go in and get, almost like an ally, another guy, so you're walking in with somebody else into a new environment, that will give you a bit of confidence, because you don't feel quite so lonely and isolated. There's a lot of, I think, small things you can do in that situation.
Definitely, Ben. I think you shed a lot of gems there, and I think it's important as well for youngsters that potentially might be listening to this episode. Reach out, speak to someone that you trust if you feel you're out of sorts. And it also reminds me, Ben, and you just mentioned the very important fact is that sometimes you think you're the only one that is low on self-esteem or low on for confidence, or you're the only one experienced, but it's not the case. I remember back in the day, on the previous pod, we spoke about the rivalry between the Springboks and All Blacks. And there was a stage I thought, listen, are we the only guys that is nervous about this game? And then when you speak to the opposition, they're like, nah, we were nervous as hell. You guys are machines. You guys are, beasts. And it's like, and then you realize, like, the perception we had of them, or the way we put them on that pedestal, they do exactly the same.
Exactly.
So that's a valid point that you made there.
Yeah, and the other thing I mentioned on the video, a couple of other things, G. One of them was just, if you can, go in and smile, because if you can smile, it deflates, it takes a bit of pressure out of you. It loosens your shoulders. It makes you more approachable to other people. Sometimes you don't smile and people can perceive, oh, he's angry, or he's sulky, or he's arrogant, or something like that. And it might not be the case. And I'm talking from personal experience, because I was pretty shy. And then people might think, oh, that person's arrogant. And you want to diffuse those situations as best you can. And that is a really difficult skill. Don't get me wrong. But the other thing I talked about, and just briefly, is just do the basics really well. That your teacher or coach isn't expecting miracles. They're not expecting the super flashy thing. They just want, you to give 100%. They know there's going to be mistakes, but just be positive and be encouraging. As a coach, what you don't want to be on the receiving end is seeing a kid who knows everything. They come out, they're super cocky. They back chat you when they make a mistake. They try all the complicated things, and then they shout at one of their teammates because their teammate dropped the ball or something like that. And you and I have both been in that scenario. So I guess be the opposite of that. Be a guy that helps your teammates, encourages them, give us 100%. Know that there's going to be mistakes, but when there's a mistake, you're just positive. You go again, and I think that's pretty much the key things.
Thanks for sharing that, Ben. Some valuable points there. But Ben, before we sign off, you have recently created a free course for parents, if I'm not mistaken, or young rugby players in your school community. If you can tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, thanks, G. Yeah, so on school.com, that we are both on, And it's an incredible platform, as we've spoken about a couple of times. But I've created, there's a classroom, and in the classroom there's different sections of the classroom, but in one of the sections I've called it a young players classroom. And so it's aimed to help and support young players from the ages of about 11 to 15, but you might be a bit older and slightly younger. It's not exclusive from that point of view, but it's probably, this is the type of age where you're trying to be a bit more serious about your rugby because you're super passionate about it. And it's really for parents as well, so that they can come on and they can, they're asking the questions. The son or daughter is asking the question, what should I eat? What type of extra training should I be doing? Should I be going to the gym yet? How, and things like we talked about, how do I handle myself in that first big trial game? Things like that. So yeah, I've created that small section in the classroom, populating it every day with more content to help people come and join. Love your feedback, questions, suggestions, so that we can all help each other.
It's brilliant, Ben. Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's a great platform, school, and well done, and to see the content that you are sharing. So for those of you that are listening or watching, please make sure to get on to Ben's community. Send him a DM on Instagram, community or school, and Ben will provide you with the link. And I've also created my own, who's called Coach G, Level Up. And, we talk about scrums, we talk about rugby mindsets, a lot of the stuff that I'm passionate about. And just a funny story for those of you listening. So I kind of lost my shit in the week because we've probably got 120 members now at the moment. And, obviously we're realizing there's 10 members that are super present. And then I called everyone out, Ben. I said, come on. You guys need to contribute. We're a team. We need to encourage. We need to inspire. You need to you need to post. And the next morning I woke up, I probably had more than 10 DMs and 49 notifications, everybody liking and commenting, and the whole day was just crazy. Because when I eventually read all the DMs, I checked all the notifications, I got busy for hours, and then there was another 10 DMs, and there were 50 plus notifications.
It snowballs, doesn't it?
It snowballs, but it's brilliant, Ben, about this communities and yours and in mine. It's a great way to connect with people, get to better understand what your needs are, how we can help you, how we can share our knowledge in a better way so that it can benefit you. But that's it, guys. Thank you for supporting our podcast, and to help us grow the show, please make sure to follow, and subscribe. Send the links to your friends and help them to really understand what we are trying to achieve the show. We're all lessons from the game. We are here to share key insights and also share our experience so it can benefit you as a young rugby player, a young coach, or just a purpose-driven human being. Thanks, guys. Thank you for joining us, and have an awesome day. Ciao, Ben.
Cheers, G.